of Indian Navy, one such person who has been one of the greatest warriors of India. And of course, जैसा मैंने कहा कि ना ही सिर्फ इंडियन नेवी के डॉक्यूमेंट्स में बट जब हम इंडिया की हिस्ट्री की बात करते हैं, इंडिया के राजाओं की बात करते हैं, तब कहीं ना कहीं उनका नाम सबसे ऊपर उभर के आता है. उनके बारे में ये सेशन है. द सेशन इज टाइटल्ड एज शिवाजी, इंडियाज great warrior king. And for this discussion, we'll be having Mr. Vaibhav ji in conversation with Dr. Nandini Sen Gupta ji and Dr. Sachchidanand Joshi ji. मैं चाहूँगा जोरदार तालियों से हम मंच पे उनका स्वागत करेंगे.
To let you all know about our panelists for today, Mr. Vaibhav Purandare is a writer and independent historian. His latest book is Shivaji, India's Great Warrior King, published by Juggernaut Books. His other best-selling books are Hitler and India, the untold story of his hatred for the country and its people, Savarkar, the true story of the father of Hindutva, Bal Thackeray and the rise of the Shiv Sena, and Sachin Tendulkar, a definitive biography. He works as a senior editor with the Times of India, and his writings have been published by the BBC, The Independent, The Indian Express, and the Hindustan Times, among other publications. We are honored to have you with us, sir. Dr. Nandini Sen Gupta is a Pondicherry-based journalist and writer of historical fiction and narrative history. Her book credits include the best-selling The Blue Horse and Other Amazing Animals from Indian History, which was shortlisted for Author Awards 2021 in Children's Fiction category and selected for the prestigious Parag Honor List and Bal Sahitya Puraskar. Can we please have a round of applause for her? Dr. Nandini is regularly invited to speak at literary festivals like the AKLF Kolkata Lit Fest, Times Lit Fest, among others, as well as academic platforms like the South Asian Studies Association Conference by Loyola Marymount University in the US and TMYS lectures in India. We welcome you, ma'am.
And as the third panelist, we are delighted to have Sachchidanand Joshi ji with us once again. He is a member secretary of the executive and academic head of the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, New Delhi. He's also a scholar of history and mass communication, a writer, a poet, and an actor as well. He was the founder vice chancellor of the Kushabhau Thackeray University of Journalism and Mass Communication, Raipur. He was also the founder registrar of Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Communication, Bhopal. His published works include Sachchidanand Joshi की लोकप्रिय कहानियाँ 2017, कुछ अल्प विराम 2018 और पल भर की पहचान 2019 and many more. और इसके पहले कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी के एक सेशन में हम सर से रूबरू हुए थे और मैं आपको बता दूं उस सेशन की जान सच्चिदानंद जी ही थे. सो जोरदार तालियां उनके स्वागत के लिए और मैं आप सभी से निवेदन करूंगा कि इस वंडरफुल एंड मोस्ट अवेटेड कन्वर्सेशन को आगे ले जाएं.
Hello, Namaste, and welcome to this very enriching session in which we would be talking about Chhatrapati Shivaji, mostly around the book which has been written by Shri Vaibhav Purandare, Shivaji, India's Great Warrior King. And about Shivaji, we all know, so I need not to elaborate about Shivaji, but the interesting part is that this book attempts to bring Shivaji with a new dimension, specially curated for the youngsters. Why I am using the word curated is that it is very meticulously written book, deeply researched. One may not get an idea, this book is around 300 pages, but the way it has been researched is remarkable. So much of references have been given. Even if you read the introduction of this book, you get the entire idea of this book. So not wasting much time on introduction of this book, because Vaibhav Purandare himself is here, so why should I talk and introduce the book? But only to trigger the discussion. Vaibhav, you have been writing mostly around prominent personalities like Veer Savarkar. You have written about even Sachin Tendulkar also. What prompted, because we know about Shivaji, many prominent writers have written, historians have written. So what exactly prompted you to take up this project and how you conceived this book and how you finally wrote this book.
Firstly, Dr. Joshi, thank you for your very kind words about my book. I truly appreciate. And hello to Nandini. We have had a number of conversations together at LitFest, and this is one more, and I always enjoy speaking with her. Why did I write a book on Shivaji Maharaj? Because, and I'm giving you the simplest possible answer, because we all know that we know everything about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and the truth is that we know very, very little about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Most of what we know is mythical. Most of what we know is not grounded in the truth, and a lot of what we know is based on misunderstandings and misconceptions and stuff that has been written for the past 100 years or so by well-known and established historians. I will just give you a simple example of what I'm talking about. My book has many, many examples of these things, but just to give a simple example, and people of Madhya Pradesh or Bhopal would be familiar with that example. One of Shivaji Raje's most trusted generals, Tanaji Malusari, dies in the year 1670 in his attempt to capture the fort of Kondhana. And we have all heard of the story that Tanaji Malusere made the ultimate sacrifice in that effort. It turned out to be a hugely successful effort. And finally, Bollywood has also acknowledged it, which is a surprise because they still haven't done a proper film on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. You know, they make films on all kinds of subjects, but they do not make a film on Shivaji Maharaj. So now a film on Tanaji is also out. If anybody needs validation that he's an important character, because many people derive their validation from what Bollywood does. For them, this is also an important thing. And when he makes the ultimate sacrifice, the story we have all heard is that Shivaji Maharaj is so upset because one of his gems has gone away. And he says that the fort has been won, but I have lost my lion. In Marathi, it is Gad ala, पण सिंह गेला. And we have been brought up on these stories. We have been groomed on these stories. The truth is that such a thing never happened. And the truth is that Kondhana was not named as Sivagad after Tanaji Malusare's supreme sacrifice. Kondhana was always known as Sivagad. It had 2-3 names. The two most prominent ones were Kondhana and the other one was Sivagad. There are references to the term Sivagad in documents from the 1940s, from the 1640s, I beg your pardon. That is when Shivaji Maharaj is still in his teenage years. There are references to Sivagad, the word Sivagad, in Shivaji's letters. So, for example, in the 1660s, he writes a letter to some of his soldiers saying that there is some treachery happening on the fort of Sivagad. Some people have, sold out to the enemy. So why don't you go and take a look? And Sivagad is mentioned that. So it is a complete myth that he renamed Kondhana as Sivagad after Tanaji's sacrifice. It was always known as Sivagad. This line itself came from a fictional work written by Hari Narayan Apte, one of Marathi's famous writers and playwrights. And it took off, and unfortunately it was adopted by various historians. One of the historians to do so was Jadunath Sarkar, who wrote tremendously on Shivaji Maharaj's life and times. But he also spread certain stories about Shivaji Maharaj which were not rooted in reality, which are not rooted in the historical record, and which are not rooted in truth. This is just one example of it. My book is full of such examples. So, of course, Tanaji's death was a major blow to Shivaji Maharaj. It also marked one of the big victories for the Marathas, because Sivagad was one of the difficult forts to win. And after Shivaji's return from Agra, he kept completely quiet for 3 years. From 1667 to 1670, he brought about a series of reforms, a series of civilian and military reforms in his administration, and he systematically started building his state. What happened with Shivaji Maharaj was that his life can be divided into three phases. The first phase is from his birth in 1630 to 1656. Why this phase ends here is that he makes a major gain in the year 1656 because he captures the valleys around Mahabaleshwar, which the area known as Zawri. These are very difficult and almost inaccessible valleys, and the mores of Zawadi were considered to be invincible. Nobody could capture that region. And Shivaji Raje goes in and captures it. And that is really the big launch of his political and military career. There are earlier launches as well, but these are smaller in nature. This is the real big launch. And this is when phase one of his career ends and phase two begins. Phase two is utterly dramatic. And it has some of the most dramatic episodes in the history of early modern India. So 56 is when the second phase begins. 1659 is when Afzal Khan is sent to kill Shivaji Maharaj and instead ends up getting killed by Shivaji Maharaj. Then 1660 immediately is Shivaji Maharaj's escape from Panhala. That is a dramatic escape, one of the thrilling episodes of Indian history. 1660 is also when Aurangzeb sends his maternal uncle Shaiste Khan to the Deccan again to destroy Shivaji Raje and the state, the independent state that he's seeking to build. Shaiste Khan is there for 3 years, and at the end of 3 years in 1663, Shivaji Maharaj cuts off his fingers and he returns humiliated. He tries to return humiliated to Agra, but Aurangzeb refuses to see him. He refuses to meet him because he's so upset with him. And Shaiste Khan is one of the noted generals of Aurangzeb, but Aurangzeb refuses to meet him, and instead he packs him off. He makes a transfer, what is nowadays known as shunting out of an official to Bengal. Bengal was considered one of the hellholes then. So if you wanted, it was a very bad posting. So if you really wanted to punish somebody, it was a punishment posting. You had to send him to Bengal. So Aurangzeb is so upset that Shivaji Raje has cut off the fingers of Shaiste Khan, and Shaiste Khan has come back humiliated, that he sends him off to Bengal. And then Mirza Raje Jai Singh comes in. Then the whole Agra episode happens. Shivaji Maharaj's imprisonment in Agra and the even more dramatic escape from Agra. And then this decade from 1656 to 1666 is full of this action. And he simply gets no respite. So when he gets that respite, he builds that state and keeps quiet for 3 years because he needs to rebuild a lot of things. There has been tremendous devastation in the Maratha territories. Shaiste Khan, for example, was there for 3 years and he destroyed everything. There are written documents that establish that hundreds of villages were simply burned by Shaiste Khan and his forces. And places were looted. Almost the entire territory was taken up that Shivaji was trying to build into a proper Maratha state. And it is because of this devastation and because of this loot of Maratha territory that in 1664, Shivaji Raje goes to Surat and carries out the sack of Surat. It's not because he loves plundering other places, but Shaiste Khan has come and plundered his region completely. So he needs to go into Mughal territory and get that stuff back. The stuff that his people, his state have lost. And he goes and gets them because Surat is one of the important trading centers of the Mughal Empire. So he goes there and gets that. So Tanaji's story is just an example of how we have got things utterly wrong and how we can get things right by referring to genuine, authentic historical documents, by not ignoring the important documents that unfortunately many historians, including Jadunath Sarkar, have completely ignored. Jadunath Sarkar actually set out to write a book on Aurangzeb. The subject of his study was Aurangzeb, and he had a lot of material left. So, what to do with this material? Let's write a book on Shivaji Maharaj. And he did tremendous service to the cause of history by writing a book on Shivaji Maharaj. He called him a great king and a constructive genius, and the portrayal was accurate, but there were many inaccuracies. And one of the key reasons I wrote this book is to correct these falsities that are there in these very noted biographies. Why are these falsities in place in these books? Because most historians who have written about Shivaji Maharaj in English and in Hindi and also in Marathi have not adequately looked at the Marathi documents and archives that exist. I will give you an example. There are two books that contemporaries of Shivaji Maharaj wrote. One was Shiva Bharat, which was his official biography written by Kavindra Parmanand. And Shivaji Maharaj himself spoke to Parmanand, asking him to write the biography and also gave him many details of his life. Now, unfortunately, people who have written in English and Hindi and also in Marathi have overlooked this very, very important source. He is a first-hand source. He was around when Shivaji Maharaj was around, and he saw things firsthand. He accompanied Shivaji Raje to many of his campaigns. And there are fascinating details of battles. Like, for example, he gives precise details of where Shivaji Maharaj is on the battlefield, what he is wearing, what kind of horse he is sitting on, what is the expression on his face, what is he saying to his soldiers. Very, very minute details which have been completely ignored. So one of the reasons for me writing this book is to bring these very, very largely ignored documents to light and to bring the truth to light. Because Sarkar relied on Persian sources largely, and those sources are no doubt very, very important, and his own contribution is immense. But some correction was necessary.
So, Vaibhav, I'm going to ask you here because you've been talking about, primary sources and how they have depicted Shivaji. We think of Shivaji. He's become like almost a mythical character, right? He is larger than life, and he's a very important part of our cultural consciousness. But who was the man? We know that he was a very, very innovative general. We know that he was in terms of politics as a king, he was a larger than life figure. He was certainly a person who was very, very strong, inspirational character in our freedom movement. But who was the man? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's a very good question, Nandini, and this is one of the questions I have tried to address in this book. And again, people like Parmanand, who wrote Shiva Bharat, people like Sabhasad, who wrote another contemporary biography of Shivaji Maharaj, and people like Cosme de Garda. Now, Cosme de Garda is a man from Portugal. He is a Portuguese man, and he lived in Goa at the time. And he moved around the Deccan around the time that Shivaji Maharaj was alive, and he wrote and published a biography of Shivaji Maharaj 15 years after Shivaji had died in 1695. And that book also has fascinating details about Shivaji Maharaj's life. So, Parmanand, for example, in the Shiva Bharat, writes about how Shivaji Raje as a little child. We again, I'm talking about the myths the stories that we hear. We will always hear that Jizabai told him stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and that is where it begins and that is where it ends for us. But there is other material available. For example, when he was at Shivneri, in the first 6 years of his life, he lived at Shivneri without a break. Then he would go to Bangalore, where his father was situated, and come back to Pune. From the age of 12, he lived in Pune, which was his father's Jagir. But when he was at Shivneri in the first 6 years of his life, and this is something written by Parmanand after his conversations with Shivaji Maharaj and with other contemporaries, because they were talking about him all the time, and he was in his army and very close to Shivaji Maharaj also. That the little Shivaji was in the habit of running after a bunch of peacocks that were, in and around the Shivneri fort. He had this habit as a child of running around the peacocks, running after the peacocks who were there. And he had the habit of imitating, he very quickly picked up the sounds of various animals in his childhood. So he was sharp from his childhood itself and picked up the sounds quickly. And very soon he started imitating the sounds of that peacocks made, that horses made, that nightingales made, that elephants made, and he would make those sounds very regularly. And his mother Jizabai had a number of women attendants around her on the fort of Shivneri. So it was one of his habits to go and scare those women when they were working by by roaring like a tiger and suddenly springing upon them. Okay. Unfortunately, our textbooks and our myths do not speak of material that is already available. Now, this is in itself fascinating, and nobody has told us these things. So this is what I have attempted to do in my book. Also, Shivaji as a person, you're talking about him as a man. There is an incident from his life where he tests the loyalty of one of his associates. This is somebody called Kanhoji Jede. He is from one of the Mawar valleys in the Deccan. And when Afzal Khan is sent by the Adil Shah of Bijapur to kill Shivaji, and by the way, if somebody tells you that he didn't want to kill Shivaji, there are written orders from the Adil Shah that Shivaji should be exterminated. And these are directives sent to the Deshmukhs of Mawar, saying that we are sending him to kill Shivaji Maharaj. You better take part in that campaign and you ensure that he is destroyed. So if somebody asks you questions, the letters are in my book. Okay. And one such letter is sent to Kanoji Jede of Rohit Khode Mawar. And Kanoji Jede goes to Shivaji Maharaj and shows him the letter, that I've got this letter. Afzal Khan has asked me to join him, and Bijapur has asked me to join him. So Shivaji Raja tells him, okay, since he's told you to join him, you must, because you've had a long association with Bijapur, and you have had a long association with all these Bijapur generals like Afzal Khan, and Afzal Khan is one of their top generals. So I understand you're going there. I mean, so by all means, you go. I have nothing to say. I'm glad you just came and told me at least. And that is when Kanoji Jede feels really touched, and he says, no, I'm not joining him. I'm going to be with you. I will not join him under any circumstances. We will fight Afzal Khan together. And then Shivaji Raje tells him, okay, I'm happy you said that. And let's take an oath then together. And then they take an oath together. And Kanoji pledges his complete loyalty to Shivaji Maharaj. Now, this is an incident in the primary sources. Again, unfortunately, we have not been told about this incident. But it's an indication of how he's testing the loyalty of people around him.
And not bludgeoning them.
Not bludgeoning them. He's also saying, okay, you go. I understand. You got a letter from Bijapur. You follow Bijapur's directives. So I leave it to you.
You see, this is the 350th year of Shivaji Raja.
Yeah.
And in the month of June, we would be completing 350 years.
Yes.
You have a chapter in your book known as The Crown, chapter 13, which gives an account of how Shivaji was coronated and how he used to deal with his administrators, how he changed the nomenclature of the entire positions which were having other influences, and how he brought it to the Indian context. That was the philosophy. So, I mean, how you rate Shivaji as an administrator and how you have described him as an administrator, that is number one. Number two, we need to also explain, especially to the people who are always accusing Shivaji of being the Hindu king, because you have also used a word Hindu polity in one of your phrases. But then, was it only the Hindu Pad Padshahi, or was it an example of excellent administrative skills which should have been adopted by everyone for that matter? So we need to discuss about that.
Yeah. So this question always arises, what kind of state was Shivaji trying to build? Was it a Hindu state? Was it a secular state? Or was it something else? My answer is very clear that Shivaji's polity is essentially a Hindu polity. He was not building a secular state. The term secular did not exist at the time. Religion was even more important in those times than it is today. Society and statecraft and states and their administration revolved around faith. And he was indeed seeking to build a Hindu polity. And what was his definition of a Hindu polity? So he was a Hindu in the true essence of the term. He was an inclusive Hindu and he was seeking to build an inclusive state. The word tolerance is a Western kind of word that, you merely tolerate other people. No, it wasn't like that. Because Hinduism is all embracing in that sense. It also accepts and assimilates from other faiths and respects other faiths. So this respect for other faiths was very profoundly a part of that Hindu polity. And it was a Hindu polity in that sense. So it was Hindu universalism, Hinduism in its essence, and the Hindu ethos of India that he and his state represented. To give an example of how he went about building the state, when he was only 16, he released what came to be known as his official insignia, the official seal. His father's official insignia was in Persian. His mother's official insignia was in Persian. Dadaji Konde was the administrator of Shahaji Raje's Jagir, one of the officials who helped Shivaji Raje with the administration because Shivaji Raje was too small at that time. Gradually, Shivaji Raje took matters in his own hands. Dadoji's official insignia was also in Persian. They were all living in the Persianate age. Everything was in Persian. And people had given up the old Indian habit of having their insignia in Sanskrit. Even Hindu Rajas of the south, everybody had their official insignia in Persian. What does Shivaji Raje do? At the age of 16, he brings out his official insignia and he brings it out in Sanskrit, not in Persian. Now, this is a very powerful statement he makes at the age of 16. Later, when Aurangzeb imposes the unjust jizya tax, for youngsters sitting here, the jizya tax is a tax meant to be paid by the infidels or the kafirs or the unbelievers because you do not believe in the Islamic faith. And Aurangzeb had started a reign of social and economic and religious oppression against the Hindus. He destroyed the Kashi temple, he destroyed the Mathura temple.
Lots of temples in Madhya
Lots of
Pradesh.
temples, absolutely, in Madhya Pradesh. Yeah. So this region knows about it all. And Shivaji Raje did not reach Madhya Pradesh or the north at that time. But he did go to Goa. And in Goa, one of the temples that were destroyed by the invaders, the Islamist invaders, was the Saptakoteshwar temple. So when he goes there, he orders the reconstruction, rebuilding, and the refurbishment of that temple. Here again, he makes an important statement. When he is coronated in 1674, he orders the construction of a dictionary which gets rid of all the Persian official terms and replaces them by Sanskrit terms, which is called the Raja Vyavhar Kosh. He mints his own coins, of course. One of his topmost generals, Netaji Palkar, has a big fight with him and goes and joins Aurangzeb. What does Aurangzeb do? Aurangzeb immediately converts him, says, I will accept you, because Netaji is the senior most commander of the Maratha army, appointed by Shivaji Maharaj. He is the head of the army. And he has a fight with Shivaji Maharaj, goes there. Aurangzeb says, okay, become a Muslim. He takes on the name of Muhammad Quli Khan. And Aurangzeb sends him to Kabul in Afghanistan to fight. And after 10 years, Netaji wants to come back. Somehow he gets in touch with Shivaji Maharaj, escapes. And one fine day, a man with a skull cap, a big beard appears in front of Shivaji Maharaj and falls at his feet and says, I am Netaji and I want to come back. Shivaji Raja accepts him back and he reconverts him. So this reconversion to Hinduism also is carried out by Shivaji Maharaj. Unfortunately, we do not know what are the rituals carried out for reconversion, because Hinduism does not have any such, to the best of my knowledge, Hinduism does not have any specific rituals for it. But maybe they made up certain rituals and got him back into Hinduism. So Shivaji Raja is very clear that if somebody attacks his faith, assaults his faith, and tries to trample upon it, he is going to push back, and he is going to push back very aggressively. And he will not allow his culture, his civilization, and his faith to be trampled upon and extinguished. Now, this is Shivaji asserting his Hindu cultural and civilizational identity. This same Shivaji Maharaj states in his letters to his generals, and who has written this about Shivaji Maharaj? Not one of his admirers. This is written by Khafi Khan, the official historian of the Mughals. He called Shivaji Maharaj a hell dog. So he hated him. He called him all kinds of names. But he said Shivaji Raja had one rule. If any of his people, while capturing a fort, or while being on some campaign, found a copy of the Holy Quran or of any other religious texts, non-Hindu religious texts, and if they found women and children belonging to the opposite camp, then that copy of the Quran must be treated respectfully and returned to the original owner of that copy with the respect it deserves. And the women and children must not be touched, and they must be sent home in dignity. And you ensure that they reach their homes properly. This is written by one of his worst adversaries, people who were out to destroy him. So, when I say he is building a Hindu state, he is building a Hindu state in the real sense of the term. And that is what a Hindu state is all about. He was not building a Hindu theocratic state, that you have to follow this ritual, then I will accept you. Or you have to, there's no theocracy there, that the Pandits are all important, only they will matter. Now we have Shankaracharyas trying to blackmail, we will not attend a particular event. So these Shankaracharya types or the others, they do not have that kind of a status in Shivaji's polity. They do have due respect. But if they try to get too authoritarian, then he also knows how to show them their limits. What Shivaji Raja also does is that he includes and employs people in his army, navy, without any discrimination in terms of faith. Two of his naval chiefs are Muslims. One is Darya Sarang Ventji. The name may appear Hindu, but he is actually a Muslim. And the other is Daulat Khan. So two of his naval chiefs are Muslims. There is an incident from the 1670s when a group of 700 Pathans want to join him. And many of his generals oppose their inclusion in the army, saying 700 Pathans, why do you want them? He says, no, we will include them. Why not include them? So he assimilates, he respects other faiths. He, in his famous letter to Aurangzeb, he says that Hinduism and Islam are branches of the same tree. You know, the same divine tree, and the source, the divine source for both is the same. So do not discriminate between them and do not impose a jizya tax, or the coming generations will not forgive you. He writes to Aurangzeb in his famous letter just 1 year before he dies. At the relatively young age of 50, he dies, and at the age of 49, he sends this letter to Aurangzeb. So, to answer your question, he is building a Hindu polity that is inclusive, universal, all accepting, but also uncompromising in the sense that if people start taking things for granted and people start attacking the Hindu identity, he is going to push back.
So, Vaibhav, I'm going to just take a cue from what you just said and ask you two very quick questions. One is the impact that Shivaji had not only on his contemporaries but also people who came later, so that he became sort of a kind of a, you know, like an iconic and inspirational figure. Chhatrasal being a case in point, and Chhatrasal's, if you can just touch upon the very interesting relationship between Chhatrasal and Shivaji, but later on also, you know, to the fathers of our freedom movement, how Shivaji became such an inspiring figure. People like Lokmanya Tilak, for instance, people like Sri Aurobindo, and others who saw in Shivaji that sort of, inspirational figure that could get all of India together. So, if you can talk a little bit about that.
I think the ethical basis of his state had a lot to do with the fact that he created a wealth of inspiration for future generations. And his policies were not only pragmatic, and his strategies were not just smart, but they had with them a certain vision. He lent to his people a certain vision. The first vision was of an independent Maratha state. The Marathas before him were simply employed in one Deccan Sultanate or the other, or they were working for the Mughals. They were denied the top military positions and the top military ranks. They were discriminated against in terms of their faith by the Adil Shahi, the Nizam Shahi, as well as by the Mughals, later by Aurangzeb. But Shivaji Maharaj did not do that. And he laid down policies of responsible and responsive conduct where state officials were concerned and others were concerned. That is why, people were so hugely inspired by him that they went on to expand the original Maratha state that he had built. Now, he was not seeking to build just a Marathi state or a state confined to Maharashtra. And his life itself is proof of that. Because in his own lifetime, he went to parts of what was then known as the wider Karnataka. And he went all the way up to the eastern coast. He went all the way up to Jinji. Okay. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 50. Had he lived 20 years later, 20 years more, the state could have further expanded, and the fight between him and Aurangzeb would have been even more fascinating, I would say. And another proof that his state was not restricted to Maharashtra, or it did not have an only Maharashtra kind of vision, was the Chhatrasal incident.
If you can just give the context.
Absolutely.
People may not.
Chhatrasal is a young man from Bundelkhand. He is actually working in the army of Mirza Raje Jai Singh. So in Aurangzeb's army. And his own parents have been killed by Aurangzeb, by the way. But poor guy, youngster, has no option. He joins Aurangzeb's army. He joins Mirza Raje Jai Singh on his Deccan campaign. And he hears a lot of stories about Shivaji Raje in the Deccan, because he is serving with Mirza Raje in the Deccan. And he feels inspired by Shivaji Maharaj. And at the very young age of 20, he escapes from the Mughal camp one day and comes to meet Shivaji in his part of the Deccan. Yeah. And Shivaji welcomes him and he says, I am a 20-year-old man, I want to join your your army. Please include me. So Shivaji Raje makes inquiries. Where are you from? He says, I'm from Bundelkhand. Where are your parents from? What happened to them? And then Chhatrasal says, no, I'm inspired by what you are doing. I want to join you. He says, no, do not join my army. He says, go back to Bundelkhand, go back to your own state and build your own individual independent state and fight the Mughals. So he does not simply want to concentrate power in his own hands. His idea is not simply of concentration of power in his own hands, but of the creation of freedom, of the pursuit of freedom, and he encourages youngsters around him, regardless of the region they come from, to pursue their own freedom. And that is an important message which reverberated throughout India after the death of Shivaji Maharaj.
So just a quick context here, those of you children who may not know Chhatrasal too well, if you have watched Bajirao Mastani, Chhatrasal is Mastani's father.
Oh yes, of course.
This is little bit.
I think that's the easier way to talk about Chhatrasal. Yeah.
So,
This message reverberates through all of the subcontinent, and the Marathas expand in a big way. They come to Indore, they come to Bhopal. You have the Holkars, you have the Sindhias. Bajirao goes all over the place, and at one point of time, the inspiration that Shivaji Raje has created turns out to be so big that the Maratha Empire extends from Attock, which is now in present day Pakistan, to Cuttack, which is in the east. Of course, the Marathas were in Attock for only 6 months, and then they came back. And a lot of internal fights happened, and they destroyed their own empire, unfortunately. But our historians ensured later that the Maratha Empire was successfully invisibilized in the history books. So suddenly the young generation has realized that after the Mughal Empire and after Aurangzeb, after Shivaji Maharaj built his initial state, we had in India such a big empire and we didn't know about it because we jumped straight from the Mughals to the British. Nothing happened in between, unfortunately, at least in our textbooks.
So, Vaibhav, at this point, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but at this point, maybe you can tell the audience why this happened and the role of British civilians from whom we take our cues for history and how the Marathas were demonized by the British.
Yeah, the Marathas were demonized. See, the Marathas were the principal opponents of the British when they were trying to seek entry into India and expand into all of India and seize that territory. So it made complete sense for the Britishers, who were very good at documenting stuff, writing stuff, and spreading stories. And they wrote a lot of villainous stuff about the Marathas, about other Indians as well, but particularly the Marathas because they had the motive for it. And they demonized the Marathas. Now, if we really start looking at Maratha documents, whether they are from Shivaji's era or the post-Shivaji era, it has now been established. And if you will read an excellent book by Stuart Gordon, since now we all read in English, Stuart Gordon has written a very good book on Maratha revenue administration in the 17th and 18th century, because people have a habit of saying that it was all haphazard, it all happened accidentally, it was not planned, there was no thought behind it, wo to ho gaya. No, actually the book and many such books actually demonstrate that no, there was tremendous thought behind it. Shivaji Raje had laid the roots of that system. In his early years in Pune, when he rebuilt Pune and he took a series of administrative measures, Shivaji Maharaj actually carried out land measurements in Pune. After that happened in Pune after a long time. There was complete chaos there. There was constant warfare there. Nobody knew which land belonged to whom. The Deshmukhs and the Patils, who were the local officials who answered to the Sultanate or to the Mughals, They did their own local dadagiri and usurped all the revenue that the villagers gave them, and they extorted stuff from the villagers and the ordinary peasants and farmers. Shivaji Maharaj, for the first time, actually carries out measurement of land. He figures out how revenue assessment is to be done. He gives incentives for resettlement of land and for cultivation of land. So, in his teenage years, he says that okay, if a cultivator constructs or puts up 10 trees, plants 10 trees, then the produce of one tree he can keep entirely to himself. The produce of the other 9 trees he has to share with the state, and this is the percentage in which he has to share. Okay. And he carries out these reforms. I'm just mentioning a couple of reforms here. There are a number of reforms I've mentioned in the book. And then later, when I spoke about the period after those tumultuous years, when he carries out thorough reforms in the administration, there are Watandars, Deshmukhs, Patils, Sardars, again, who are these local officials representing the state and troubling people all the time on behalf of the state. And there is no accountability at all. And these Watandars have developed a habit of building palatial homes for themselves. Whereas the peasants, the farmers are poor, the villagers are poor, they are starving, okay, they are unjustly taxed. So one of the earliest orders issued by Shivaji Maharaj in 1667 is that no Watandar will from now on build any palatial home. You will live in the same kind of homes that ordinary people live in. And he goes a step further. The palatial homes have already been constructed by many Watandars. He says demolish those homes and build regular houses. So he gets that thing done. He again gets a fresh land revenue settlement thing done. In military administration also he carries out a number of reforms. Now you might say that every kingdom had its rules, and we are sure that the Adil Shahi also had its rules, the others also had their norms. So what was the difference? One was the laying down of responsibility, which wasn't there in the other kingdoms. And second was transparency and accountability. For example, the Mughals or the Adil Shahi imposed 30% taxation on the villagers. Ultimately, what was taxed was far more than 30%. So 70%, 80% was taken away. Shivaji Maharaj started at 30% and then he increased the tax assessment and the tax collection to 40%. So you will say, and I will also say, that he took more taxes from the villagers than the other kingdoms did. But what was the difference? When he said 40%, he took exactly 40%. And the peasants and the ordinary people had such tremendous faith in his state that they were happy to pay that 40% because they were being exploited. And the beginning of this, the root of this is his order of 1646, when he's 16 years old, the same year in which he brings out his official insignia. And that is the heart of what Shivaji Maharaj is all about.
You say,
So there is a letter, I'm sorry, I'll just complete this. When he's 16 years old, Shivaji Maharaj gets a complaint from an ordinary village woman. Women have no voices anyway, right? In that day and age. He gets a complaint saying that she has been sexually assaulted by a patil. He is the revenue collection agent for the village and he also has policing responsibility for the village. So he's in the real sense the dada. And he is accountable to no one. So Shivaji Raje verifies if the complaint is true. He calls the patil, and because it's early modern India and capital punishment is still very much in place, he orders the hands and legs of that patil to be cut off. Now this sends a very powerful message right through the Deccan, because this is something that has not happened. Who is this boy? This is a 16-year-old boy and he is doing this. So Shivaji Raje starts bringing in transparency and accountability from the age of 16 itself. And this incident is the beginning of the political revolution that he ushers in. And this is the key. If we know this incident, then we know what the state is all about.
Do we have time, or should we?
Just I just wanted to, because the example which he gave was in fact what I was supposed to ask him. So in fact it's an interesting thing which has happened. We all know that Shivaji has a powerful influence of his mother over his life, Mata Jija Mata, and the sanskar which we say, he has been groomed in such a way by Jija Mata that he had all the sanskars. And we have always read about Shivaji's respect for women. And there are few instances about the respect which he showed Kalyan Subedar's
That is a
daughter-in-law.
completely false
But
story.
that is what I
That's
just
the
wanted
fake
to
story
ask you.
that has been
Yeah,
circulated.
but that is what I was supposed to ask you, because when the story came and then there was controversy that it is a fictitious story and it has never happened. But have you come across any other instance in which we can see Shivaji's respect for women, other than the Khalita which he brought out at the time of his coronation? But there are instances where he showed respect for the women, and how he ensured safety to the women in his estate. That's an important question.
Well, one is the Kafi Khan comment that I mentioned, because he does it right through his life. It's not just one incident, because he ensures that women get a certain agency, they have a certain position in society at a time when women do not really have the kind of voice that they have today. No? But he does it right through his life. But this first incident that I mentioned of the Patil of Ranjhe village in the Mawars is really the example that stands out, because this is the policy that he continues right through his life. And it's a policy that is the official policy of his state, in the sense, acknowledged by his adversaries as well.
Questions from the audience?
या आगे ले आई माइक, सबसे पहले यहाँ से हाथ खड़ा हुआ.
Good evening, I'm Commander Chakravarti. Yes, my question is, when you brought in these facts, sorry, how much pushback did you receive? Because we know another author, James Lane, and there was a Bandaka Institute on all that episode, and somebody linked that to you. So how much was the pushback?
No, they didn't link it to me. They linked it to Baba Saheb Purandare.
Okay.
Yes, this is a very different Purandare.
I was supposed to ask him, but I didn't ask him. I'll ask him in private.
So please don't invite an attack on me.
Okay.
And you are a commander, so you will. I trust you will protect me. Then,
Yeah, sure.
if I face anything.
So what, if you have read his book, how much of it is fact? Because there's a lot of fiction going around, as you have brought out, and you have been one who has cut out a lot of this, lot of misinformation which has been going on, bringing facts. So if you have read his book, what are there facts? And
Whose book are you talking about?
James Lane.
His book is more about Shivaji, and Shivaji being perceived as a symbol of Hindu nationalism. It's not really a biography that he has written, and mine is a biography. So it's a very different book. He talks about perceptions of Shivaji Maharaj, and he talks about his portrayal as a leader of Hindu nationalism, and he goes into all of that. So my book is very, very different. It's a biography that relies heavily on and entirely on primary sources, and every line is a matter of record. I mean, I've not pulled anything out of my hat.
Thank you very much for clarifying. Just another question was, could you throw some light on the maritime aspects and the seaborne aspects of his campaigns in a broad overview? Of course, there's no time for details, but
Yeah. That's a subject in itself, in fact. When Shivaji Raje started his political career, India has a massive coastline, and that coastline was ruled completely by 4 foreign powers. They were the Portuguese, they were very powerful. They were the French, they were the Dutch, and the British were just about coming in. And what had the Mughals done? What had the Deccan Sultanates done? From the time of the collapse of the Chola Empire in the mid 1250s, nobody had bothered to look at the coastline. No Indian indigenous ruler had bothered to look at the coastline. If the Mughal Badshah wanted to go to Mecca or Medina, or if the Adil Shah and his family, his wife wanted to go to Mecca and Medina, they would actually take a license or a passport from the British or the Portuguese or the French to go to the waters and take a ship out. Trade was also dependent on that. Shivaji Maharaj was alone, he was singular among all his contemporaries to realize the importance of the waters, the seas, in terms of both defense and trade. And he started building his naval fleet when he was only 28, 29 years old, 1658, 1659. And that is when he's already facing the threat of Bijapur and Afzal Khan. And he starts building his naval fleet north of Mumbai in Kalyan, Bhiwandi, and those places. And he has no military technology. So what does he do? He starts employing Portuguese naval engineers and British naval engineers. And in the British records and the Portuguese records, there is talk about how British and Portuguese officials are complaining to their authorities in Portugal and in England that Shivaji is taking away all our engineers. So then London is asking, or the Portugal is asking, how is he taking away? Because he's paying them a lot more money. So he is very intelligent. He pays them money and he builds his own naval fleet. At the same time, he starts teaching his indigenous people how to build that naval fleet. By the year 1674, when he is coronated, he has at least 50 combat vessels ready with him. They are of different shapes and sizes and different in quality as well. There are the small gurabs, there are the small, big, and mid-sized vessels. There are big vessels, but 50. And if you count his trading vessels, which he uses for trade, he has already started trading with overseas territories. Then the total number of vessels come to 700. Now this is astonishing because this is done in just a 20-year period. But he alone had that vision to build it. So that is why everybody always says the Cholas, of course the Cholas are great. Nobody wants to deny any credit. We all better acknowledge their credit. But many people suddenly remembered the Cholas after several decades only when the Indian Navy dedicated its official insignia to Shivaji Maharaj last year. Before that, the Cholas were completely forgotten and nobody bothered about them. So the Cholas, of course, are great. But another distinguishing factor between the Cholas and Shivaji Maharaj, one is there is a 400-year gap where no Indian ruler or nobody in India thinks that the coastline is important. And this man, who's actually not from the seas, but from the mountains, realizes the importance of the sea. The distinguishing factor is that the origins of the Chola Empire are in a river valley. So they had an inner awareness of the importance of water and of waters and the seas. Shivaji Maharaj comes from the mountains, the Deccans, and he systematically moves towards the sea, and he ultimately builds his capital, Raigad, at the intersection of the Deccan and the coastline. It's actually on the coastline, right? Raigad is on the coastline. Yeah. So look at the thought, the clarity of thought and action that is there. So that's why if somebody tells you why not Cholas, this is the reason. So that's why he's the father of the Navy, while we all acknowledge the greatness of the Cholas.
डॉक्टर सुदेश वाघमारे सर
नमस्कार.
नमस्कार सर. ये एक क्यूरियोसिटी हमेशा रहती है. कहा जाता है कि शिवाजी महाराज को अक्षर ज्ञान नहीं था. He cannot read and write. Is it true?
Actually, the existing documents do indicate that he had learned to read and write, because Parmanand writes about it in Shiva Bharat, that he was taught to read and write. But there is no letter in his own hand, and that is because people did not write in their own hands. He had people writing for him. So he would dictate the letters and people would write those letters. So nothing was signed by those people, right? Either there was the official insignia, which was stamped on all documents, which is there right from the time he turns 16 years old.
Yes.
But he could read and write.
All right.
Yeah, at least that is the first hand account we have from the official biography commissioned by Shivaji Maharaj. So then we have to rely on that.
All right.
But his father definitely knew Sanskrit. He appreciated Sanskrit a lot, and his son actually wrote Sanskrit. Sambhaji Raje wrote in Sanskrit.
Thank you.
Any other question from the audience? I
Uh,
believe.
If there's no I have one question which we never got to discuss. We
Sure,
know
ma'am,
about
sure, ma'am.
Jijabai's, very quickly, know about Jijabai's role in Shivaji's life. What about the other women in his life?
That's a very interesting question. Unfortunately, women in Indian history, at least women in the medieval eras and the early modern era, they have largely been ignored and their lives have been ignored. And unfortunately, we don't know about their inner lives, what was going on in their life, because they were not considered, it was a deeply patriarchal society. But Jizabai was a very powerful woman in her own right in that patriarchal society, because she stood her ground, she was self respecting, and she really gave him spine and spirituality. That's what I feel. She gave him two things. One was the spine, which he further built on, and his deep sense of spirituality also comes from her. The other women are Shivaji Raje's wives. He had 8 wives in all. We know mostly about 2 of them. One is Saibai Nimbarkar, his very first wife, and the mother of Sambhaji Raje. And the second is Soerabai, because she is the mother of Rajaram, his other son. Saibai and he were married for a few years, and there is only one record of her intervention in his life, in his political life. These women did not play much of a role in the political and military career of Shivaji Maharaj, but in his personal life, they must have. But unfortunately, nobody wrote those accounts. But what Saibai did in 1648, when Shahaji Raja was arrested by Bijapur, on the suspicion that he was encouraging his son Shivaji Raje, who was turning into a rebel by capturing some hill forts in the Deccan. And that's written by James Grant Duff, but he also is not a very reliable historian. But that's the only account we have from one of the Marathi Bakars. By the way, the Bakars are notorious, so don't rely on the Bakars at all. They are not contemporary accounts. They are all 19th century, 18th century, and most of them have all this Pekam Pak, like this Kalyan Subedar Achisun and all that. It's all nonsense. Nothing of the thing happened. But Saibai intervenes, and when so Bijapur says, we will release Shahaji Raje only if you give up all these forts. And that is when Saibai intervenes and tells her husband that you stand your ground, you don't do that, you don't give all your forts away. And he gives away one of the important forts, but he also maintains a balance at that time, because he is very realistic and pragmatic. He is pragmatic right throughout his life. And that is her solitary intervention in his political life. Significantly, she dies very young. She dies when Sambhaji Raja is only 2 years old. And very importantly, she dies only 2 years before Shivaji Maharaj has his encounter with Afzal Khan. So it's a traumatic time for him also. It's 1659, he is 29 years old. His wife has died. The son is 2 years old. And his mother Jizabai is now looking after the 2-year-old son. And she dies very early, in fact. And Jizabai almost brings Sambhaji up as his mother. And then there is Soerabai. By the way, not many people would know here that Shivaji Maharaj actually had 6 daughters. They also played absolutely no role in his life. In his life, in the sense, in his political life, they did not play a role. They were all married off, presumably early, to various Maratha, they were married off in various Maratha families. And 3 of them were born to Saibai, that is Sambhaji's mother, gave birth to 3 of these daughters. And one of them was Soirabai's daughter also. And then two other wives gave birth to two other girls, and four of his wives gave birth to no children at all. But this is all, to answer your question fully, I was trying to answer it fully. We know very little about these women. I really wish we knew about the daughters, about how they felt about the father. And no, unfortunately, we have no contemporary accounts. And I don't want to narrate fiction here. When I do write fiction, I will try and incorporate that.
Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank Nandini ma'am and Joshi sir for this very stimulating session about the man whose legacy, like you said, spread from Attak to Katak. There is definitely a need for his history to be seen in terms of facts and not from personal or political biases. And your book, Vaibhav sir, is certainly a very positive direction in that step. So we thank you for that. Can we please have a round of applause for Vaibhav sir? I'd also request you to kindly spend some time at the author's signing desk alongside Antarang in the courtyard so that people can interact with you more and get the copies of your book signed by you. Moving forward, as a token of our appreciation and gratitude, I would like to request Mr. Devendra Kumar Mehta, Secretary, Society for Culture and Environment, to present our panelists with mementos. The mascot for BLF 2024 is developed by senior Gond artist Sri Ram Singh Urveti ji. It reflects a motif rooted in timeless stories. With vibrant strokes, Ram Singh ji brings to life swaying trees and mythical forms, echoing the melodies of Bandev, the revered musical instrument of the Pardhan Gonds. The particular piece chosen for this year highlights how ideas that BLF also helps spread take root as seeds and grow into beautiful, luscious and sturdy trees, spreading their influence all around them. Thank you so much, Nandini ma'am. Thank you so much, Vaibhav sir. Thank you, Joshi sir. Can you please have a round of applause once again for them? Now, continuing with our sessions, for the audience, we have a quiz since we've been talking about the Marathas. I have a question for you all. Can